Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a really fascinating mission ahead of us today, exploring a truly mind-bending philosophical sci-fi text called The Aperture Variations.
Yeah, it's a wild one.
It really is. But before we get into the massive cosmic shifts this source material covers, I want you, the listener, to start by picturing a very small, very mundane scenario.
Right. Keep it grounded first.
Exactly. So imagine waking up tomorrow morning to a sound you know perfectly well, the gentle mechanical gurgle of your coffee maker.
Sure.
You watch the little amber light blink 3 times before it starts brewing. Then you realize, with a sudden and just sinking certainty, that you have been listening to this exact sound for 17 years, but you have absolutely no memory of buying the machine.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right? You don't know why you chose it.
Yeah.
You don't even know if the memories you have of drinking that coffee actually belong to you. So, okay, let's unpack this.
It's a profoundly unsettling image to start with. It captures that terrifying moment of feeling utterly untethered from your own life.
Yeah, like you're a stranger in your own kitchen.
Exactly. And that feeling of dissolution is the fundamental foundation of the aperture variations. I mean, the text initially presents itself as this intimate, deeply distressing diary of a protagonist who seems to be experiencing severe cognitive decline or, perhaps some kind of localized temporal anomaly.
Like their brain is just glitching out.
Right. Their reality is simply breaking apart. But our goal today is to trace how the narrative takes that terrifying concept, the idea of literally losing your mind, and completely redefines it.
Which is the craziest part of the whole text.
It really is. The text frames this fragmentation of identity not as a disease, but as the ultimate evolutionary upgrade, a process it calls consciousness multiplication.
I gotta say, I found that shift so jarring initially because those early chapters, they just feel like a straight-up horror story.
Oh, absolutely. It's claustrophobic.
Totally. We are essentially trapped in the protagonist's 7th-floor apartment, just looking out the window while their internal world completely dissolves. Like they start finding notebooks filled with handwriting they don't even recognize.
Yeah, the classic dissociation trope, but pushed to the extreme.
Right. And there are these records of intense philosophical arguments they apparently had with this analytical manifestation of themselves named K.
Yeah, and the environment inside the apartment really reflects the psychological state of the protagonist. I mean, Kay eventually stops being just a voice in a notebook and begins physically manifesting in the apartment.
Just sitting there in the living room.
Exactly, sitting in a chair, speaking like a reality technician. And then another fragment, which represents the protagonist's emotional and relational consciousness, manifests in the form of a woman from a photograph on the shelf.
Which is so creepy.
It is. The protagonist is quite literally splitting into different entities that are sharing the same physical space. And the text brilliantly uses the physical environment outside the window to explain the mechanics of what is happening inside the protagonist's head.
Right, because across the street, there's this surreal construction site. I mean surreal. It isn't a normal construction site. They aren't like putting up steel beams or pouring concrete or anything.
No, not at all. The workers are building an absence.
Wait, building in absence? What does that even mean?
Well, Kay, the analytical manifestation, explains this to the protagonist. Instead of adding materials to create a presence, the workers are systematically adding the spaces where materials could go. They're constructing pure non-being.
It hurts my brain just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's highly conceptual. But this introduces the core mechanism of the text, which is the aperture. The theory here is that consciousness isn't a fixed, continuous lens through which we view the world. It's a variable opening.
Like a camera lens.
Exactly. Sometimes it is wide open, taking in everything, and sometimes it closes down to a tiny pinhole.
Which totally explains the workers' bizarre behavior at this construction site. Because the source notes that these workers pause their intricate dance of, building nothingness for exactly 43 seconds, over and over again. Why 43 seconds?
Right, so that specific duration is critical to the mechanics of the aperture. 43 seconds is the exact processing lag. It's the time required for a disjointed consciousness to capture sensory data, parse it through a fragmented neural network, and pass it to the next active personality before looping back.
So they're not just slacking off.
No. The workers aren't taking a union break. They are literally waiting for themselves to return from a temporal loop.
That is wild.
It is. This architecture of absence is the perfect blueprint for the protagonist's mind. The protagonist's unified self is being hollowed out. They are creating an internal absence to make room for multiple simultaneous identities to exist without colliding into each other.
It's like, think of it like a computer trying to run on a corrupted hard drive. Like having 100 browser tabs open, but you only remember opening one of them, and all the other tabs are having arguments with each other.
That's a great analogy.
But it makes you wonder, is the protagonist just losing their grip on reality, or is reality itself breaking down?
Well, what's fascinating here is the text's core thesis. The protagonist isn't breaking. Their consciousness is actually calibrating to a nonlinear reality.
Calibrating. Wow.
Yeah, the fragmentation is a necessary adaptation. The unified mind simply cannot process the infinite complexity of true reality without shattering. So once the protagonist stops fighting this dissolution, once they accept that they are becoming several distinct people sharing the same biological hardware, the narrative just pivots wildly.
It really does. It's a complete left turn.
It moves away from this existential nightmare and turns into an incredibly efficient economic and logistical strategy.
Right. So if they aren't fighting for dominance over the brain anymore, what do these different puzzle pieces actually do? Do they just, like, sit around the apartment arguing with Kay about the nature of reality forever?
Not at all. They become hyper-specialized and intensely productive. The original protagonist basically recedes into a managerial role, and the fragments take over specific functions.
Like a corporate reorg of the soul.
Exactly. One persona, who calls himself Marcus Venetian, becomes this highly sought-after temporal architect. Another one, Dr. Elena Threshold, is a brilliant academic researcher publishing groundbreaking papers on post-temporal subjects.
And then there's my favorite, C. Temporal Smith.
Yes, the prolific writer fragment who casually churns out 17 books on consciousness distribution in a matter of months.
Okay, wait. So this isn't just an internal psychological coping mechanism. It's a lucrative business model. The source mentions they're generating over $200,000 annually through these coordinated personas.
The financial success is just a byproduct of their pristine coordination. They operate as what the text calls a consciousness democracy.
A consciousness democracy. It sounds so utopian.
Well, they actually hold morning coffee meetings in the apartment. Kay provides the analytical framework for the day, the woman from the photograph manages their emotional equilibrium, the primary aperture coordinates the overall schedule, and the professional avatars go out and execute the work flawlessly.
Because they don't have to worry about anything else.
Right, they are completely unburdened by the other aspects of life. They even attend these specialized dinner parties to meet others who have undergone this multiplication. The text describes them as events of carefully curated emptiness, where they dine on the conceptual spaces between the food.
See, okay, I hear you saying it's an evolutionary leap in cognitive efficiency, but I am genuinely struggling to buy into this specific outcome.
How so?
Well, if my specialized selves are out there working 7 different high-level jobs just to be quote-unquote efficient, how is that not just the ultimate dystopian capitalist hustle culture?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Right, like instead of going to therapy to become a single whole person again, this protagonist leans into the fragmentation and basically becomes a highly profitable small business.
Wow.
You are literally monetizing your own psychological breakdown so you can work around the clock.
That is a very fair critique.
Who is actually enjoying the downtime? Who's actually living the life?
It is incredibly easy to view it through that modern lens of burnout and exploitation. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the text counters that perspective by analyzing the hidden costs of our current existence.
Okay, I'm listening.
It argues that maintaining a unified identity, forcing yourself to be one consistent person at work, at home, in crisis, and in relaxation is an incredibly exhausting, energy-draining illusion.
I mean, I guess it is pretty tearing sometimes.
We spend vast amounts of cognitive power just holding the facade of the single self together. By fracturing, the protagonist eliminates that friction. The goal isn't actually to work harder. The goal is integration.
Integration, meaning the parts communicate effortlessly rather than fusing back into one exhausted person.
Precisely. The specialized selves operate simultaneously without draining each other. When the writer persona is writing, it isn't distracted by emotional turmoil or analytical doubts, because those functions are being handled completely seamlessly by the other apertures.
Oh, wow. So no imposter syndrome.
Exactly. You get the psychological stability that we usually associate with unity, combined with the raw, frictionless processing power of multiplicity. The energy that used to go into suppressing contradictions is now freed up completely.
Okay, I admit, it solves the individual's problem perfectly. But the minute the protagonist steps out of their apartment and tries to operate in the real world, they hit a massive wall.
Because society isn't built for them?
Right? Society is entirely built for single consciousness people. If one person doing this is a profitable anomaly, what happens when thousands of people start fragmenting? This is where the source material scales up from a personal diary into basically civilization 2.0.
Yes, the systemic breakdown of traditional infrastructure is immediate. The narrative introduces the Department of Cognitive Affairs, which is this government body attempting to conduct a standard census.
Good luck with that.
Right. They encounter mathematical impossibilities. They find populations simultaneously increasing by 300% and decreasing by 60%.
How does that even compute?
Well, the number of physical bodies remains static, but the active identities inhabiting those bodies are multiplying, shifting, and merging constantly. Standard tracking just becomes completely obsolete.
Every traditional institution just crumbles under the weight of this biological shift. The text goes into how the education system has to be entirely overhauled. I mean, imagine being a teacher in this world.
It would be a nightmare at first.
Total chaos. You might have a third grader who walks into the classroom on Tuesday operating under an analytical aperture, meaning that 8-year-old suddenly possesses graduate-level math skills. But then on Wednesday, an emotional or creative aperture is dominant in that exact same child, and they struggle with basic addition. The schools can't follow a standardized curriculum anymore. They have to assess which version of the student is sitting at the desk that morning and just adapt the entire pedagogy on the fly.
And if education sounds difficult, the healthcare system faces an even more dangerous chaos.
Oh man, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, medical protocols are forced to evolve because the actual mechanisms of illness change. Different apertures within the exact same physical body present entirely different physiological symptoms.
Wait, how does that even work mechanically? If it's the same biological body, how can one personality be sick and the other healthy?
Well, the text leans into the profound connection between neurology and the immune system. When a different aperture takes control, it activates entirely different neural pathways, which in turn literally alter the body's hormonal and chemical baseline.
You're kidding.
No, it's fascinating. One persona might trigger a severe histamine response, presenting as a life-threatening allergy, while another persona in the exact same body has a completely suppressed immune response and is perfectly fine.
That is mind-blowing.
Right. Medications that cure the academic persona might be metabolized completely differently and fail to work on the artistic persona. So medicine has to become consciousness adaptive, treating the active mind state rather than just the physical organ.
The logistics of that are just staggering. But, the legal system is where I really trip up on the practical application of all this.
I know. The legal implications, yes.
Yeah, from a purely legal standpoint, how does liability function? Let's say one of my apertures goes rogue and robs a bank.
Okay.
The other apertures in my network genuinely have no memory of the event and had absolutely no control over the body when it happened. Isn't that the ultimate alibi? How do you throw someone in prison when only a fraction of them is actually guilty of the crime?
It's a great question. Traditional law relies absolutely on the concept of a unified, accountable self with continuous memory. That paradigm totally shatters here.
It has to, right?
Yeah. The text proposes this really elegant evolution of the social contract. The legal system abandons individual accountability and shifts to a concept called aperture coordination responsibility.
Okay, I'm going to need a translation for that. Aperture coordination responsibility.
Yeah.
Does that mean you were judged on your management skills rather than your actions?
Essentially, yes. The law begins to treat multiplicity not as a mental defect that excuses criminal behavior, but as an advanced capability that demands advanced responsibility.
Go on.
You, as the integrated collective, are legally liable for managing your own network of selves. If one of your apertures robs a bank, you aren't punished because you committed the theft. You are punished for gross negligence in your legal duty to coordinate and manage your apertures effectively. You're judged on your competence as a consciousness manager.
Okay, I think I get it. Think of it like owning a highly trained, potentially dangerous dog.
Yeah.
If the dog bites someone in the park, the dog doesn't go to jail. You go to jail for failing to keep it on a leash. The legal system in this society treats your subpersonalities like autonomous entities that the primary you is responsible for keeping on a leash.
That perfectly captures the mechanism of liability, yeah.
Yeah.
It is a fundamental rewriting of how humans relate to one another. But the text makes it clear that this societal restructuring, the changing of schools, hospitals, and laws, It isn't just a bureaucratic reaction to a new problem.
Right.
It is the necessary precursor to humanity finally aligning with the natural rhythms of the Earth and the cosmos.
Because the final act of this deep dive zooms out so far, it honestly gave me a mild case of vertigo.
It really expands the scope.
We move from the protagonist's apartment to the city's infrastructure, and suddenly we're dealing with the entire universe.
Yeah.
We're introduced to the planetary consciousness monitoring station.
Right.
And they discover that cities with high densities of these multiple consciousness individuals are actively improving atmospheric chemistry.
The data in the text reveals that the presence of integrated human multiplicity actively stabilizes weather patterns and neutralizes airborne pollutants.
Okay, I have to stop here. How on earth does a group of people splitting their personalities neutralize a pollutant or stop a hurricane? What is the actual mechanism connecting a fragmented mind to atmospheric pressure?
So, the text treats consciousness not as a passive byproduct of brain chemistry, but as a fundamental active fabric of physical reality.
Like gravity.
Exactly, much like gravity or electromagnetism. When billions of human minds were forcing themselves to operate as disorganized, unified, singular entities, they were constantly fighting their own nature.
Okay.
This internal conflict created a metaphysical heat or friction that radiated outward, disrupting the natural physical systems of the planet. By fracturing and integrating into these highly coordinated apertures, humans remove that friction. They become cognitive superconductors.
Cognitive superconductors, wow.
Yeah, and without that interference, the natural physical systems of the Earth can finally run smoothly.
And the text points out that we shouldn't even be surprised by this because the planet's ecological systems already function exactly like an integrated multi-consciousness.
They really do.
Like, a forest doesn't operate with a single unified brain calling all the shots. It communicates through vast, distributed mycorrhizal fungal networks under the soil, sharing resources and information simultaneously.
Right, the mycelium network.
Yeah. A watershed integrates 1,000 different streams, aquifers, and evaporation cycles without a central command. The Earth was already operating on a multiple-aperture system.
Human consciousness evolution is completely reframed here. It isn't a departure from nature into some artificial technological future. It is a recovery of our ancient natural ability to plug into the fundamental coordination principle of the biosphere.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The narrative doesn't stop at the Earth's atmosphere.
No, it goes much further.
We are introduced to the Institute for Cosmological Consciousness Studies, which, mind you, simultaneously exists on Earth, on Mars, and in interplanetary space. Right. They detect that this human consciousness multiplication is correlated with phenomena on a massive scale. Like, it stabilizes planetary orbits, it optimizes the rotation of the galaxy, it even interacts directly with quantum entanglement.
It's incredible.
The individuals who successfully split and manage their minds are basically drafted into what the text calls universal consciousness service.
The scale is just breathtaking, and it explains the true purpose of the fragmentation. This raises an important question, right? What does it mean to be human if our cognitive states are inextricably linked to the rotation of distant galaxies?
It changes everything.
The text posits that consciousness is the ultimate interface of all physical reality. When the protagonist was sitting in that apartment, learning to split their mind and coordinate those pieces with Kay and the others, they weren't just becoming a more efficient architect or a prolific writer, they were learning the native language of the cosmos.
It sounds like humanity has spent its entire history stubbornly trying to run the entire universe on an old single-core processor.
That's a brilliant way to put it.
We were trying to force every complex experience, every contradiction, every piece of data through this tiny overheating bottleneck of the unified self.
Right, and it was just causing the system to crash.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the rest of nature, from the fungal networks in the soil all the way up to the rotation of spiral galaxies, was already running on a massive quantum cloud computing network. And by fracturing our identities, we finally just downloaded the right firmware to join the universal network.
The fragmentation the protagonist experienced at the beginning wasn't a breakdown at all. It was just the messy, disorienting installation process of that firmware update.
The reboot phase.
Yeah. We stopped trying to be separate, singular nodes and became a coordinated network ourselves, which allowed us to interface with the ultimate coordinated network of the universe.
Let's trace this whole incredible arc back to where we started. We went from a guy standing in his kitchen, staring blankly at a coffee maker with a blinking amber light, terrified that his reality was dissolving, to a universally integrated consciousness that is casually managing quantum possibilities and keeping planetary orbits from decaying.
It forces a profound reevaluation of what it means to feel scattered, fragmented, or pulled apart by the demands of life.
And that is exactly where I want to leave this. Next time you feel completely pulled in a dozen different directions.
Yeah.
When you are exhausted, trying to balance the ruthless, efficient version of yourself that goes to work with the patient, nurturing version of yourself that deals with your family and the creative, restless version of yourself that stays up late pursuing your passions.
We all feel that strain.
We do. But maybe you aren't actually overwhelmed. Maybe you aren't failing to hold it all together. Maybe you're just experiencing the very early, messy stages of advanced consciousness integration.
You aren't breaking. You are simply expanding your internal architecture to meet the complexity of the reality around you.
Which brings us back to that coffee maker, brewing the same cup for 17 years. If you didn't have to be just one single person drinking that cup, if your consciousness could safely and cleanly split into specialized, highly autonomous apertures right now, what is the one specific daily task you would permanently outsource to an alternate version of yourself?
And considering they would possess their own awareness.
Would that version of you eventually resent you for it?